Head coach Dan Quinn clued us in a little bit on why quarterback Jayden Daniels' performance may have been dipping a little bit lately and why it may return to normal as early as this weekend against the Dallas Cowboys. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, everybody, to today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. Also find me this year helping out with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team. And I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. Thank you for coming through for today's episode. And if you're an everydayer, I greatly appreciate you coming through every single day. Of course, Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, on which we're going to discuss the updated divisional and playoff picture for the Washington Commanders. We're going to go over our defensive mid-ish season awards like we did our offensive awards on the last episode. We're going to talk about the big run by Saquon Barkley to effectively end last week's game against the Washington Commanders for the Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to start it all off with the Washington Commanders, hopefully starting to get healthy and maybe getting back to a little bit more normalcy on offense. We're going to do all of that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. And new customers, you can place a $5 bet and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Go to FanDuel.com to get started today. Jayden Daniels is not injured. That is the ultimate definitive statement that Dan Quinn started off with in his press conference on Monday, his Zoom press conference. We haven't talked to Dan Quinn since post-game Thursday night after the loss of the Philadelphia Eagles. He got a little bit of time off. Players got a little bit of time off with the extended break between the Week 11 and Week 12 games. So coming back Monday, we got to speak to Dan Quinn, and that's one of the things he was asked about is just kind of what's been ailing Jayden Daniels a little bit. Of course, a lot of us noticed on Thursday that uncharacteristically inaccurate. You go back to the previous Sunday against Pittsburgh Steelers. There were some moments where Jayden Daniels was uncharacteristically inaccurate. So, the concern obviously there, and the questions going into it were, was it the rib injury? Was it just how good the defense is? Is it the pressure the offensive line was giving up? Like, what was really kind of the root of that? And Dan Quinn basically came through and said, look, Jayden Daniels is not injured anymore. That's not part of this. But Dan Quinn did go on to say that part of what he believes is causing some of those offensive deficiencies, some of those inaccuracies, some of maybe some timing issues on some of those throws was the lack of practice reps. And he mentioned that specifically. So I kind of went through and kind of took a look at Jayden Daniels' practice history over recent weeks, going all the way back to Week 8. Of course, Week 7 is where he suffered the rib injury against Carolina Panthers on the very first drive of the game, knocked him out for the rest of that game, really put his future in jeopardy as far as whether or not he would be able to play Week 8 against the Chicago Bears. And in that practice week, Jayden Daniels missed completely 2 full practices in that week. Was able to play or practice limited in the Friday practice before that Sunday game against the Bears and was ultimately able to go against the Chicago Bears. But that was kind of one of the first games where the offense kind of stagnated a little bit. And most of us, myself included, we kind of chalked it up to the Chicago Bears defense just being one of the better defenses in the NFL. And I still think there's some merit to that, obviously. And then going up against the New York Giants the following week, he was limited the first 2 days of practice, which means he did miss some reps in those practices against the Giants, and then was able to play against the Giants again. Maybe a better performance, I would say, but still not as great as I think a lot of people would like it to be, going against an opponent the caliber of the New York Giants. Was not on the injury report at all Week 10, so full participant in practice every single day, not even listed with an injury anymore, which goes back to Dan Quinn saying, Jayden, we all keep talking about the rib, we keep talking about all this other stuff. He's not injured anymore. So not on the injury report at all for Week 10 against the Steelers, was able to practice. There were some inaccurate moments against Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, a lot of us kind of chalked it up to Pittsburgh Steelers, really good defense, a lot of pressure, TJ Watt, Hightower, all those guys, or Highsmith and all those guys. And I think that's still, again, like I said, merits. I think there's still some merit to that. And then Week 11. Now, Week 11, right? Again, Jayden Daniels not on the injury report, full participant in practice, but normal, normal process for teams going into those Thursday night games is you really have a bunch of glorified walkthroughs, if not straight up walkthroughs. You don't really have any full speed intense practices. And that's kind of what Dan Quinn was talking about. So again, week 8, he misses 2 full practices. Week 9, limited in 2 full practices. Week 10, he gets a full week of practice, which is good. But then week 11, you're basically doing walkthroughs all week. So 3 of the last 4 weeks, you do the math here, and Jayden Daniels has gotten 4 full practices in the last 4 weeks. So that's certainly not a great amount of practice. And even though, they've had all the training camp reps and certainly some unscouted looks that he's gotten full speed reps on and all that stuff, I think basically what Dan Quinn is saying is all of that missed time and then the restrictions because of the short week and all that stuff basically came back to kind of, bite him. Ultimately just kind of caught up to them, right? He kept kind of kicking the can down the road and all that stuff. And eventually just kind of caught up. So, if that's the case, then what you're really looking forward to, what Dan Quinn is obviously looking forward to, is this week, the Washington Commanders will get a full week of practice. Jayden Daniels is not injured anymore, so he won't be hindered in any of those practices. He'll be able to get all the reps that he needs to get. And you will hopefully see a much more in rhythm, a much more synced up Washington Commanders offense coming in this weekend against the Dallas Cowboys offense. So that's the explanation that Dan Quinn gave. I would still venture to say that there's still a combination of some other things. Obviously, going with the old cliche, if they get paid too, right? The Eagles defense certainly has part to do with that. I still think the hand injury, Jayden said it wasn't a big deal. Obviously, it's not something that's going to be enduring on any injury reports from what Dan Quinn said on Monday. But, I kind of always just go back to, like, we've all had rug burn. We've all had, these kind of just minor things that happen that don't really take you out of action or commission per se. But I always go back to kind of feeling that tightness in that muscle, especially in the immediate aftermath. And then when that's on your throwing hand and it's a cold night, the football is harder because it's a cold night. I always kind of go back to that. And then again, Jayden Daniels all night long. As soon as he handed a ball off, hands went back in the warmer. As soon as he threw a pass, hands went back in the warmer. So to me, the cold weather was clearly on Jayden's mind and in his head. So I think just a combination of all those things led to some of those inaccuracy issues that we saw on Thursday that hopefully we won't see on Sunday. And look, it's not going to be warm. It's not going to be freezing. It should be like 40s, 50s on Sunday at Northwest Stadium in Landover, Maryland. So Jayden, I don't want to make too much of the cold. I don't think that was like a huge debilitating factor, but it's just kind of something I noticed. In other injury news, Marshon Lattimore, Dan Quinn telling us that he's hoping Marshon Lattimore will be able to get into practice a little bit this week, be able to start kind of participating in those practices. Of course, that's got a lot of people excited to maybe get to see Marshon Lattimore against CeeDee Lamb. I would not get that, to that level of excitement just yet. Me personally, I'm still not expecting him until after the bye week. And that's not so much my reading the tea leaves or having any information that nobody else has. That's basically me protecting myself from driving myself crazy every single week, every single practice day, wondering, is Marshon going to play? Is Marshon going to play? Is Marshon going to play? We all want to see Marshon Lattimore play. I certainly want to see Marshon Lattimore play. I've watched Marshon Lattimore play a lot of football for the New Orleans Saints while covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Super excited to watch Marshon Lattimore play for the team that I cover versus a team that's going against a team that I cover. So personally, like I said, I'm just not going to anticipate it until the post-bye week, which, funny enough, would actually be in New Orleans facing his former team, the Saints. And if that is his first game, I think I would be interested to know, is it possible he'll be a team captain for his first game? It's kind of been the trend here, is if you're facing your former team, you'll be a team captain. I know Jeremy Chin was not a captain the week that they faced the Carolina Panthers, but Frankie Louvu certainly was. So it'd be interesting because, even though Marshon hasn't played a game potentially by then, he's still in the building, he's still in meetings, so certainly still has an opportunity to impact the team and his teammates and everything else. So still could be showing leadership traits, even though he's not on the field. So just, again, not a nonsensical conversation to have right now, but just something that's on my mind. And then, the thing that we have to remind ourselves of, if Marshon's a limited participant on Wednesday, limited Thursday, limited Friday, he's a very talented player, right? And really the hard part of learning a new defense, it's the checks, it's the signals, it's the language. None of those things necessarily require live reps. Like, you can do those in walkthrough fashion and still get somewhat comfortable with them. It's just a matter of comfortability. And like Dan Quinn always says, Marshon being able to go out there and be fully Marshon Lattimore. So that's the latest on some injury news, some updates, doing some good things, it sounds like, for the offense, but specifically the defense. But there's already been some good news for the defense. Our mid-ish season defensive awards coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders. part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Z-Biotics. Pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Z-Biotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. So step by step, step number 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make that pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and to get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by FanDuel. And with FanDuel, you can get ready to tackle all of the NFL action in Week 12 with America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers to FanDuel, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets on the NFL all in one place. Of course, you can place your pre-game bets. Washington Commanders were 9.5-point favorites ahead of Monday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys falling to the Houston Texans. We'll see if that line moves throughout the week. But if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the play-by-play, get so much more information all on the same page where you can place that in-game bet. So go to FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Continuing now with today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Yesterday, we did our mid-ish season awards for the offensive side. Today, we're going to look at the defensive side of things. And if you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, sign up today, become an insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider today. From there, I will be texting you updates. I'll be texting you information that I get, news that I get, analysis, conversations, and you can be texting me your questions and your comments and your thoughts all the same. And of course, you'll get access to our insider-only Zoom conferences, which happen once or twice a week as much as we possibly can, where you and I sit down on a Zoom conference and we just kind of hang out, man, and just talk ball, talk Washington Commanders. So again, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Try it out for free. Become part of the ever-growing population of insiders. Shout out to the new insiders for this week for signing up already ahead of Cowboys week. I appreciate you, and I thank you for giving it a shot. So our mid-ish season defensive awards, obviously we're past the midway mark of the season, but with the extended time between the Eagles game and the Cowboys game, kind of our first chance to really kind of reset, take a look at how this thing has gone. We did our offensive rookie of the year, MVP, newcomer of the year, and coach of the year on yesterday's episode. Today here, we're going to do the same for the defense. And for me, the rookie of the year has been cornerback Mike Sainristil. Everybody was excited about Mikey Sainristil coming to the Washington Commanders via the NFL draft, arguably the best defender in his class, for his position. Everything else very small in stature, right? 5'8", not a big imposing figure, but man, does the dude play big, and he plays smart, super mature dude. Talking to him on the record, off the record, just his maturity, his intelligence really just kind of jumps out at you, and it really jumps out on the field as well. And the fact that Mikey was able to not only transition from the college game into a slot defender fairly quickly, but also then transition outside when his defense needed him to, just shows even more about his football IQ, his acumen, and his work ethic, and his willingness to do basically whatever his team is going to ask him to do. So Mikey Sainristil has been every bit as advertised for the Washington Commanders, a first-round talent, certainly getting drafted there in the second round. The MVP, I think, has to go to linebacker Bobby Wagner, the veteran who's brought in not just for his ability to play, but also his leadership in the locker room, leadership on the field, coach on the field. Joe Witt Jr., defense coordinator of the Commanders, has mentioned multiple times to us in press conferences and in conversations that Bobby has had to, at times, because of the pace of the game and the pace of the opposing offense, set plays, call plays on his own, right? There just wasn't time for Joe Witt to communicate a play to him, to go through all those processes. So Bobby just had to do it on his own and would set, very, very good plays, positive plays for the defense. So Bobby Wagner, I think, even when you get beyond the stat sheet, his influence on this team, and not just the defense. Like I watch him and Jayden Daniels interact. They've definitely got a big brother, little brother kind of dynamic going on there. I think it's really helping Jayden also get and stay comfortable in the National Football League. Newcomer of the year, we're going to go linebacker Frankie Louvu. Very close race between he and Dante Fowler Jr., but on a rep-to-rep basis, and some of that is because Frankie Louvu is getting more reps than Dante Fowler Jr. is. Dante Fowler certainly making very good usage of the reps that he's getting. So if I could just do both, that would be great. We call it newcomers of the year. They can split the trophy. There is no trophy. Frankie Louvu, however, rep to rep, down to down, making a lot of impacts, even impacts that don't hit the stat sheet, freeing up other guys to make tackles or stops. We've talked about those several times here on the show. And then coach of the year, I'm going to go defensive backs coach Tommy Donatel. And he's a coach that not a lot of people talk about. Like, we haven't interviewed Tommy Donatel this season during the regular season, but we've interviewed Willie Gay, the assistant defensive backs coach, right? So like Tommy Donatel not getting a lot of love these days, but look, that's secondary. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the strength of the unit, right? But I think when you go pound for pound, like when you look at the defensive line, how they're performing versus what we expected, the linebackers, how they're performing versus what we expected. And look, it's hard when you're Ken Norton Jr. Like you got Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu, Jordan McGee, Michael Walker on special teams. Like that's a really good unit. So it's hard to look at Ken Norton Jr. and be like, look at all the play he's getting out of these guys. Like these are really solid guys. So it's a little bit harder for him. But look, there were a lot of questions about this cornerback group specifically, but the secondary just in general, and one of the best defensive secondaries in the league right now in preventing explosive plays. And I think that's really a big credit to Tommy. And then also, again, Mikey Sanders still moving from the inside to the outside. Obviously, good coaching is going to help that transition as well. So Tommy Donatel, defensive backs coach, getting my nod for coach of the year so far on the defense. Looking at our film review, we only got time for one film review today. The most requested film review is a breakdown of the Eagles' 39-yard touchdown, which is the moment in the game on Thursday night that you pretty much say, all right, this thing is over. So looking at the tape here, the Eagles come out in 12 personnel, one running back, two tight ends. They're in bunch formation, and wide receiver Johnny Wilson and the tight ends Grant Calcaterra and Dallas Goedert are bunched in tight with the right side of the offensive line. A.J. Brown is the lone receiver, split left. He's wide left by himself. Saquon Barkley is the single back. Jalen Hurts is under center. Now, the Commanders have a 3-down lineman front with 2 defenders standing up on the edges. So that's 5 defenders on the line of scrimmage total. 3 second-level defenders are within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. 2 in the box, Bobby Wagner and Percy Butler. And 1, Jeremy Chin, is right outside the box to the defense's left side. So you have a 7-man box to start. Very close to an 8-man box, which would be a stacked box. But I don't call Chin inside the box because he is aligned outside the bunch. And so now not only are you outside the offensive line boundaries, but you're also outside the skill position boundary. So I don't call it an 8-man box. Mikey Sanders still is the far defensive left corner. Quan Martin is alone as the single high safety. And at the snap, all 3 of the Eagles' bunch skill position players, so again, the receiver and the 2 tight ends, to the right become blockers. They immediately go into a blocking movement. The Eagles line immediately starts pulling to their right, the defense's left, and this causes Chin, Dorrance Armstrong Jr., Sheldon Day, and Wagner to all flow to the defense's left side along with that movement by the offensive line. Johnny Newton, the right side defensive tackle, is trying to force some sort of kind of confusion or disruption up front, but he ends up on the ground, really not making an impact, leaves Landon Dickerson, the Eagles offensive lineman, free to then pick up Frankie Louvu, who is on the backside trying to pursue the play, essentially taking 2 defenders out while the Eagles only have to use 1 blocker to do it. Meanwhile, Cam Jurgens is making his way up the field to the second level and just completely wipes out Percy Butler, just sends him flying, crashing down to the ground. So what you end up with is you have a 4-man wall to the left for the Eagles, the defensive left side for the Eagles offensive right side, and a 3-man wall staying right in order to open up the lane up the hashes. You always go back to that old Vince Lombardi video where he says we're going to make a seal here and a seal here and run the ball right up the alley. That's basically what the Eagles did, and that alley is right up the hashes. So it gives Saquon Barkley a very, very wide berth to cut back into. Philly kind of uses that outside zone stretch look to get the defense moving one way and then sets up the backside cut for Barkley. Barkley is very patient, allows everything to develop in front of him, and then picks the right moment to hit the cutback and head up the lane very, very well. When he does, there's no backside pursuit because Newton is on the ground. Louvu is now blocked up. Cleveland Farrell has a backside contain opportunity, but he gets run out of that lane by Mekhi Becton, and Percy Butler is on the ground upfield, and who should be your last line defender. As the deep safety, Quan Martin doesn't quite see the backside cut developing by the time he realizes Barkley is heading back inside. Martin's too far up into the outside zone look to make any real play on the cutback lane. When Butler gets up, he's running the wrong way because when he goes to the ground, he still sees outside zone. So when he gets up, he's reacting to outside zone and essentially takes himself even further out of play. Now, Cam Jurgens does actually give Percy Butler a very big shove in the back, which should be a flag for a block in the back. But if I'm going to stay true to my sports theologies here, I hate when referees throw flags on penalties that had no bearing and clearly had no bearing on the play that happened. By the time Jurgens pushes Butler in the back, Barkley is already gone. Percy Butler is not going to stop that play, even without that block. So don't necessarily hate that there was no flag thrown. Michael Davis is the corner that's on A.J. Brown opposite of the flow of the play. Never really had a chance to make an impact there. So overall, you got one guy on the ground at the point of attack for the Commanders defense. You got another guy on the ground on the second level. You got a third level defender with a bad angle and read, and you have an overrun by a backside defender. Those four things ultimately lead to a 39-yard Philadelphia Eagles touchdown. Coming up next on Locked On Commanders, we're going to talk about the NFC East standings and the Washington Commanders' current playoff standings and chances. That's coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Built Rewards. Okay, real talk time. We've all been there feeling like we're burning cash with those rent checks. It's frustrating, right? But here's the deal. Built Rewards has figured out a way to make rent more rewarding. Say goodbye to the money bonfire and hello to a renter's revolution with Built. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points towards a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle, whatever it is you need. Pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. So earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure you use our URL so that they know that we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. Start earning points with your rent payments today. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, and we're getting into week 12 of the NFL season. And so it feels like a really good time to start tracking the Washington Commanders divisional standings and also playoff standings and odds. And starting off with the NFC East. The NFC East, obviously, the Washington Commanders taking a loss this week. The Philadelphia Eagles getting the win. The Dallas Cowboys taking a loss to the Houston Texans on Monday night. And the New York Giants were on a bye week. Of course, Daniel Jones has been benched and will not be starting against Tampa Bay Buccaneers this weekend in a game that the New York Giants should also lose. So Philadelphia Eagles, clearly they're in first place in the NFC East. They've got one more win than the Washington Commanders. They've got two fewer losses than the Washington Commanders. So that's where they stand right now. The Eagles also the only team undefeated in the division. And the way things are going, it kind of looks like unless they lose to the Washington Commanders in their second matchup of the year coming up in week 16, when the Eagles come to Washington, the Eagles may very well finish undefeated in the division overall. So the Commanders certainly need the Eagles to lose some battles here coming up in order to have a chance to get back into that NFC East divisional race. But first things first, and the only thing they can control is getting their own wins starting this weekend against Dallas Cowboys, who are now 3-7, have a 1-1 record in the division. Commanders obviously looking to send that to 1-2 this weekend and improve to 3-1 themselves. And the New York Giants about as out of it as you can get without actually officially mathematically being out of it. So the Washington Commanders hosting the Dallas Cowboys this weekend. The New York Giants hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this weekend. The Philadelphia Eagles are your Sunday night matchup facing the Los Angeles Rams, who are 5-5. But I will tell you, don't sleep on those Los Angeles Rams. That team is dangerous in its own right. And the good news about the NFL is division records are a tiebreaker, not a decider. So the best record wins the division. However, if you tie, then the division record comes into play. So the Philadelphia Eagles head-to-heads come to play. Division records come into play. So the Philadelphia Eagles Like if they lose 8-3 to the Los Angeles Rams, the Commanders take care of business, move to 8-4, then you're just one loss off the path of the Philadelphia Eagles. So certainly far from over. Currently, however, the Washington Commanders are the 7th seed in the NFC playoff picture. The number 1 seed, the Detroit Lions. 2nd seed is the Philadelphia Eagles, leading the NFC East. 3rd, the Arizona Cardinals, who are 6-4, but leading the NFC West. And then the NFC South, leading Atlanta Falcons, are the 4th seed. 5th and 6th seeds, both coming from the NFC North right now. Green Bay Packers are the 6th seed at 7-3. Minnesota Vikings, the 5th seed at 8-2. And then, of course, the Washington Commanders pulling up the tail end there at 7-4. So the Washington Commanders win. If the Los Angeles Rams are able to beat the Philadelphia Eagles, you're hoping the 49ers can beat the Packers, and you're looking for a Chicago Bears win over the Minnesota Vikings. Probably not going to happen, but if it does happen, then the Washington Commanders move up to the 6th seed in the NFC. The Vikings still sit at the 5th seed. But that Packers loss is really kind of the key there to the Washington Commanders advancing for the playoff seeding pictures right now. As a percentage goes, the Washington Commanders, according to playoffstatus.com, who does all these probabilities for us, currently stand with a 2% chance to win the Super Bowl, but that's okay. They have a 5% chance of making the Super Bowl, 14% chance to be the NFC conference champion, 35% chance to make the second round of the playoffs, and an 83% chance to just simply make the playoffs. So even with the loss, the Washington Commanders' chances of making postseason play still very, very good. And of course, they go up even more with a win over the Dallas Cowboys, would go up even more with a win over the Tennessee Titans. So a very good possibility that the Washington Commanders enter their bye week as a 9-win team. And of course, you get to that 10-win mark. You're very much in competition for a playoff spot. You get to 11 wins. You're almost as short of a playoff spot. So we'll continue to monitor that as the weeks go on. Coming up in our next episode of Locked On Commanders, we're going to take our first look at the Dallas Cowboys. But I've also got an interesting look I want to take on Terry McLaurin, his usage in this Washington Commanders offense. So we'll get into all of that coming up on our next episode of Locked On Commanders. So make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you are getting those alerts, doing whatever you need to on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is text me. And to do that, all you got to do is become an insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders and become an insider today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. It's all new and it's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.